Okay, I got Keith Bodnarchuk, CEO of Cosa Resources here again. That's COSA.V, joining me for a news update. He's got drill results from your Murphy Lake North project. It's 70% owned in a JV with Denison. It's a pretty darn compelling property. It's along trend of the famous Hurricane deposit, very shallow targets, close to infrastructure, all those different characteristics that make a project potentially quite impactful. And so I won't step on your toes too much, Keith, here, but you kind of left us with a bit of a cliffhanger ending, right? Where you really showed all this potential for discovery with a lot of very tantalizing results, but maybe not the capital D discovery that is obviously the goal. But maybe I'll get you. So yeah, thanks for coming on. Good to see you again. But maybe I'll just get you to just walk us through as you would, the news release as it stands. We'll go from there.
Yeah, certainly. So yeah, great to be back on here and great to see you again. And for sure, I mean, we just underwent really the most exciting drill program as a company for Cosa, and we've really hit the most significant results we've hit as a company. And you hit the nail on the head where you said we're hitting a lot of these tantalizing results, which are really, I'd say key ingredients of what you look for before you ultimately make a discovery. And so, yeah, we were on the edge of our seats as we started to advance this drill program. And ultimately, yeah, we finished the 8 holes and we were done the program for this year. But what we left was a whole bunch of follow-up targets in and amongst this project. And yeah, it is a fantastic project. The location of it was really the reason why we did the transaction with Denison, and having, a project located next to the Hurricane deposit. And as you've told your viewers before, we're very familiar with the Hurricane deposit, having found it during our time at ISO Energy. And so it's an area of the basin that's highly active. Cameco is actively exploring in there. Obviously ISO Energy, it's located right next to a significant amount of infrastructure, and it's shallow. In Athabasca Basin terms, it's, a lot of the major deposits, the McArthur Rivers, even Denison's Phoenix deposit, those are 400 meters down. Our target depth is about 250 meters down, and that's significant when you're looking to explore these areas, because that means exploration costs are lower. Even your threshold for deposit size could potentially be lower just based on having that shallower target depth. And so when you factor in all that stuff, it's a reason why we really jumped at the opportunity to acquire this project from Denison Mines. And it's important to note, as you said, that they maintain a 30% interest, and they're very excited by these results too. Chad Sorba, our technical advisor from Denison, came up to site and was really excited by what we were seeing there. And so yeah, maybe just show a map of Murphy Lake North there. Again, I'll kind of explain. So when we originally looked to acquire this project, right, we knew that there's going to be these 2 trends. There's obviously the Hurricane Trend, which is to the northwest there, that hosts the Hurricane deposit, which is obviously the highest grade indicated uranium resource in the world. And so that was a big reason why we wanted that sliver there that continued on to our project. But there's also this parallel trend that we labeled the Cyclone Trend, fitting since it's parallel to the Hurricane Trend. And the interesting one about this one was that Andy identified it, Steve, our chairman, identified this as an opportunity of a parallel trend that had seen really no drilling. And so we knew at some point we really wanted to get to testing this one, because, as compared to our portion of the Hurricane Trend, we do have a large portion of this Cyclone Trend, and it's one that was untested. It's shallow. It's obviously parallel to a major trend. And so when we set out during this drill program, we're like, okay, we'll drill. We'll kind of do maybe a bit of a back and forth where we go to Cyclone and then we go back to Hurricane and kind of work our way around, and then we'll let results decide where we should continue to drill. And when you set out to drill a new trend in the Athabasca Basin, even if there is good geophysical signatures, everything, there's a high probability that it's just background rock. That's just the way it is. And so you never know when you poke a hole into a new trend. And so we drilled that first hole, MLN 2505, on the eastern edge there of the cyclone, far eastern edge of the Cyclone Trend. And it hit interesting results, right? It started to show really strong sandstone alteration. And so we went back up, did a hole on the Hurricane Trend. It was interesting too. We hit some more stronger alteration, but we knew we wanted to come back down to Cyclone and really focus in on this area, because we were seeing really strong alteration, really strong structure. The strength and, the volume of the alteration we're seeing is similar to what you'd see in around a major deposit in the Athabasca Basin. And so once once we did 5, we did the whole 7, 8, and we started to really kind of systematically test this trend. And everywhere we were drilling, we continued to hit this strong alteration, which just really just shows the volume of what's happening in that area. And it defined, over 2 kilometers of this strong alteration. And that's, for perspective, that could easily host a major deposit, that level of alteration. And so that's what was really exciting for us. Like I said, we were on the edge of our seats with each of these drill holes because it was showing all these key ingredients. And, we have a lot of unfinished business there, but it was very, very successful program for us. Like I said, the most significant results we've had to date as a company, and we really got to head back there. We left the drill on site. Dennis is excited to go back there. They want us to go back there as early as we can to continue following up these results.
I guess the question I wanted to ask you, right, is that so everyone's excited about hurricane, and then obviously you switch gears to cyclone. When did you guess? And again, maybe this is you did just kind of do it briefly there, but in the moment, when did you decide to kind of go for it at cyclone? What were you seeing, or what was what was the hole that you kind of decided this is where we need to spend more time, or to spend the bulk of our drill budget here?
Yeah, certainly. So I think, like I said, we'd originally set out to go back and forth, and we started at cyclone since it was a larger trend. And so we went cyclone, went back to hurricane, then back to cyclone. I guess, it was really starting to be hole 5 and 7, the first 2, like we're seeing, strong alteration in those. And so we went on and did hole 8. We headed further to the west, and that one hit even more significant alteration structure as compared to 7 and 5. And so it just kept getting better. And, the hurricane trend, the hole we drilled there is still very interesting. And it's one that we probably want to get back up into that area to test it. We simply ran out of holes, right? We were hitting all this interesting stuff in and around cyclone. And so we wanted to make sure at the end of this program, one, yes, we, further advanced that hurricane trend with that hole we did in the area, but also we did a good systematic approach with cyclone. So now we can use geochemistry results, whatever, further structural interpretation of the core, really take our time to understand and help vector towards where we want to follow up on the cyclone trend and, hurricane trend and, potentially other parallel trends that might exist even further south of cyclone. And so I think it was just really exciting about what we were hitting there. And so, I mean, I wouldn't say that we've necessarily pivoted away from hurricane. It's not a binary event. It's not one or the other. It's important that you're advancing both. And we just felt with what we're seeing at cyclone, it deserved those next few holes for sure to advance it and to get it to a stage where you got to understand hurricane deposit has a whole bunch of holes in that area on the ISO-energies side and things like that. So there's a lot to help vector there, whereas cyclone had no holes. So that helped guide why we continued to focus on cyclone.
Well, then maybe on hurricane, and so I'll circle back and ask you to clarify this, right? Previously, and it resonates with me, drill it and kill it, right? That you need to be aggressive but also decisive, right? You don't have $1 billion market cap, limited budget, right? You got to be kind of decisive when you're move fast if you think it's barren, and I like that. So yeah, you're saying that it's not so much that hurricane. There's still goods that deserves to be explored there. It's not so much that hurricane is just an off, so much as cyclone was so much more of a positive surprise, maybe? Is that kind of the way to phrase it?
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, there's a very realistic chance when we headed down to cyclone that we just got background rock.
Sure.
There was no drilling.
Yeah.
Compelling geophysics targets, compelling from a regional standpoint, obviously being parallel but it had no drilling. And so anytime you enter a new space like that, you have to temper your expectations. And you know what? It was surprising. It was amazing to see what we were drilling there. And when you factor in how much space we have there, right? It's like we defined over 2 kilometers of alteration, but in between those holes, there's ample room to fit something of significance. And obviously, we haven't closed off the alteration, and so we can go east, west, and there's just lots of unfinished business there. And going back to the drill and kill, yeah, that is the approach we do try and take. And you have to remain disciplined. Obviously, us saying hurricane, it makes sense because it's a catchy name because it is a long trend of the deposit, but you have to move to where you think your best opportunity is. We have not killed off that area on hurricane, but we do have to understand that we don't have unlimited space there for sure. And so with that, when we're hitting better, or at very least equal results at Cyclone, you got to focus where you have a lot more space too.
Well, and that's a bit of a stickier question here, right? But just because, well, on Hurricane, right, you can see on the map here that,
Yeah,
I mean, you are bounded by ISO. I mean, you've kind of got this
sure.
little wedge of the trend that obviously has been extremely successful for you in the past. But does that, I mean, how much? I mean, you have 2 kilometers of trend, but as you can see on the image here, the lion's share lies outside your borders. And I know that a lot of explorers, and not unreasonably, but sometimes frustratingly, don't like to kind of chase to borders, right? To chase the discovery onto someone else's land. How much does the fact that you've kind of got that toehold, does that kind of alter even kind of implicitly your decision when it comes to what to budget or how to approach exploration on hurricane versus cyclone?
No, I think as long as we just feel that we have space to fit a deposit, we'll continue to explore right up into the border. I mean, Hurricane goes right up into the border, and so we've obviously had, as a group, we've had a lot of success drilling right up into a border, and that goes right onto Cameco's ground. And some of the best intercepts that the Hurricane deposit has are meters from the border. And so we won't be deterred by that, but I think it's just more so, if the main part of Hurricane's like 100 meters long, so there's ample space for us to fit something in on even our remaining
Mhm.
hurricane trend right there. I just think that, like I said, what we went to Cyclone just because we were surprised by how good the results were, and they deserve to be followed up in real time with those remaining holes. But no, we're not deterred by a border. It's better off to even have 50% of the deposit
Mhm.
of significance than 100% of nothing, right? So
Mhm. Yeah. Well, no, that's it probably it means that I need to recalibrate my expectations coming at this from other metals too. Where, yeah, it was, and you and Andy were on the KU report there, and Andy said that 90% of the uranium in the Hurricane deposit was 130 meters of strength. So yeah, that's nothing, right? Like that's a very
yeah.
very tiny target, which, like you say, 2 kilometers, lots of room to hide that in. Fair enough. And so maybe we will just one more. And using your hurricane deposit, ISO's hurricane deposit as a peer comp, are there any sort of key similarities or differences between the two thus far in terms of what you've seen? Obviously, very early days, so it's not a kind of a one-to-one at all. But just based on kind of the early trend, early tell from Cyclone, especially, I guess, is there any sort of key similarities or differences to remark on?
Yeah, I think just, the vast volume of the alteration we're seeing, right? It's about the strength and the volume, right? There's always a chance in the Athabasca Basin you go and you hit a little bit of radioactivity, but in and around that radioactivity, it's not showing this sheer volume and strength of alteration, right? We have defined over 2 kilometers of it, with really a few drill holes. And so I think it's kind of interesting to compare the two trends, because it's important to note when the guys acquired the Rockies project during their time at ISO, Cameco had multiple years of drilling there, which really created a lot of information that they could
Mhm.
leverage, which then led to them discovering Hurricane with the very first drill hole, whereas Cyclone had no information besides
Mhm.
some geophysical targets. And so now we've upgraded to where we now have information that can help vector us and to help maybe hopefully create that situation where we can look for that key follow-up target like we did at the Rock East with the Hurricane deposit. And so it's it's kind of interesting just how similar they're starting to set themselves up to be, with us having this initial program here. We are hitting interesting stuff, and maybe we just haven't quite found the sweet spot. But I think it's like it's really just the volume and the strength of the alteration that is making us see the similarities. But it's also important to note that all these deposits aren't the same, right?
Mhm.
There's going to be subtle changes to it, and if we can't just chase the exact same blueprint as Hurricane, otherwise we might miss something. Even though it is obviously located, but you look for the key major things it has. Sure, the large graphitic faulting that we're seeing in the basement. Like I said, the massive amount of sandstone alteration and things like that. Those key things, the orientation of the trend, obviously being parallel to, like, all those things are key, but the subtleties, you can't get bogged down in the weeds of otherwise you might just get kind of cornered into an area and you might miss miss a new opportunity to make a discovery. And so that's the approach we've always taken. We also worked on Phoenix, a lot of us, for Denison, and that's slightly different than Hurricane. And so there's always gonna be subtle differences between them, but overall it's looking pretty fantastic as compared to Hurricane.
Is there a correlation between the size or scale of the alteration, the size and scale of the deposit? Is there a positive correlation between those two things? Like if I were to ask you, does the scale of the alteration at Cyclone compare to the Hurricane deposit, or based on the data you have, is that a meaningful data point to discuss, or no?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. Like you'll
So
see
then,
that,
so
like
then,
Cigar Lake. Yeah,
okay.
Cigar Lake has a massive amount of volume around it, right? Volume of alteration. Even Phoenix deposit, when we spent time there, as opposed to something that's background, right? That's not. So I think you need that. Like these deposits are tight, they're quite small, but you need a whole bunch of this fluid,
Hmm.
a whole bunch of volume of fluid going through there to ultimately form these high grade deposits. And so that's, especially these unconformity type, that's quite common. For sure, that's something that is required. So as far as direct correlation, maybe not quite, but there's definitely a correlation that exists between the amount of alteration and.
Sure. Well, then the obvious follow-up then, again, I mean, you're how many holes are you in now on Cyclone, 8 or 9 or 7 or 10 or something?
Yeah.
So it's early days, and I need to be careful when I ask these kind of sort of questions. But where, in terms of the scale of the alteration, then, I mean, is it comparable to what you saw? Like, in terms of the size of the potential structure here, the playground that you get to explore in now, what does that look like compared to Hurricane?
Yeah, and so that's probably a good question when we ever get Andy on here, as far as he's been more in the weeds on. But it's this alteration zone that we're seeing at Cyclone is large enough and big enough to host a major deposit.
Hmm.
It is like that's we have over 2 kilometers of it already formed, right? And that's, you think about the discoveries that have occurred, and there's definitely enough alteration in this area to form and host a major deposit. Now it's still exploration at the end of the day, so there's no guarantees, but we're just excited by that feature.
Mhm.
And now we got to just continue to drill around this area and hopefully ultimately make that discovery.
Well, then that's a natural segue here. I mean, of course, now I'm going to ask you what now or what's next, knowing full well that you got to wait for assays and how important sort of the geochem results from those assays are and helping dictate where to go next for you. But I mean, right now, even if it is still just based on not enough data to be confident in terms of plugging and drilling there right away, but what's next?
Well, definitely. Like, I mean, you could just even see the gaps in between the fences there, right? Like, you see where 9, 10, 8, 9, 10 are versus 7 versus that 5 and
Mhm.
12. There's so much space in between those, right? That's over 2 kilometers. And
Hmm.
as we touched on, Phoenix deposit, it's 200 meters long, right? And so there's lots of ample space to follow up in between those. And then you also head further to the east in and around 5. There's strong alteration going right up to there. So there's plenty of space to test on either side of that, or even further west of 11, right? I think 11 didn't hit that significant of results, but it seems like it might just have overshot the optimal target area. And so
Hmm.
there's plenty of stuff. And then also at the bottom of 7, there was really interesting graphitic unit deep into the basin, deep below. So we don't have a cross section of it,
Sure.
but that one deserves to be followed up too, because that could potentially be a parallel trend that has yet to be explored. So there's so much happening in this area, and the geochem that we're still waiting for will help, I think, guide, maybe the size of the step out, like, or, how much, whether we focus in and around maybe 8, 9, 10 versus 12 or 5. I think that'll help us vector towards where we want to go, for sure. And so I think it's early days to pick, exact targets, but we just know that we got to get back into this area.
You expect to get when can we expect assays? Do you have a notion of when?
Yeah, it'll be a couple months. I think what we'll do is try and include any interpretation on that when we update the market on what our targeting will be for the upcoming program in early 2026. And so I think we'll try and update the market on that to just kind of give an idea of how we're targeting and why. It's important to know too that, an 8-hole program is significant in that area. And it was very cost effective, for us to achieve that. We're talking $1 to $1.5 million out of
Yeah,
our
wow.
treasury to do a similar
Yeah.
size program. And Denison has been very supportive, and they're eager for us to get back there. And so with them, contributing their 30%, that obviously reduces costs from our standpoint. And it's just good to have their support for sure. And and they're an extra set of eyeballs too on the targeting, and they're actively involved because they do maintain 30%. It's shallow. It's in a great area to make a discovery for sure.
So then how much cash on hand do you have left? Then Nick, you said your burn rate's nice and low, 30%, and to
Yeah,
bring
and
that.
so we're on pace to, I'd say, finish the year with about 3 million in the
Oh,
treasury.
good.
So
Yeah.
that's a great.
So no pressure there, eh? Yeah.
No, and that's I think that's another thing too. Like I said, it's so nice to be drilling these shallow holes in this area because your dollars can go a lot further, and that's important for a junior company. It kind of goes back to Craig. Craig Perry was our obviously former CEO at ISO Energy when we were there, and he had this, size of the prize, cost of the test, chance of success. He's like, that
Yeah.
cost of the test is a big thing, and you got to be realistic. And so, yeah, for sure, that's another reason why we love exploring this area.
I think that's it, Keith. I mean, yeah, Cosa, there are very kind of compelling details emerging from their drill campaign that suggests they have a whole lot more to be doing up there. It deserves a lot more attention on their part at Murphy Lake North. Yeah, but Keith Bodnarchuk, any just get last words to you, final thoughts?
Just to keep watching for news flow here. We'll be updating. We also spent a bit of time going through our Darby project, which is another joint venture with Denison Mines. We're updating. We have some very compelling targets there, and that Darby project, is important to note, was a huge part of that acquisition with Denison, really Darby and Murphy Lake North. So we'll be updating the market on some target generation we have there, and then just more news flow in and around these results from Murphy Lake North as we continue to digest and receive our geochemistry and really speak with the Denison team until we're able to update the market on what our upcoming targets will be.
No, excellent. Yeah, good luck. Get those assays back. Well, good luck with them, and hopefully we get to a quick freeze up and you can get back up there fast, eh? So
yeah, awesome. Sounds good.
okay. All right. Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, Matt.